Once a week, we connect live to a correspondent overseas who fills us in on K-culture news in the country they are located in. Today, we go over to China, a major market for Hallyu or the Korean wave. We are now connected to our K-correspondent Steve Hatherley, host of the Roundtable podcast at CGTN Radio in Beijing. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, guys. Oh, my gosh, this is so exciting. You know, I lived in Korea for such a long time. Now I'm here in Beijing. I worked for Arirang before. Now I'm working for CGTN, and we get to connect this afternoon. This is a wonderful opportunity, and thank you for the invitation.
Exciting to have you on the program, Steve. So, yes, as you said, I mean, to longtime regular Arirang TV viewers, you are a familiar face. You were a radio and TV personality here in Korea. But please briefly introduce yourself to the Culture Wave viewers and your current role in Beijing.
Sure, yeah. As I mentioned, I lived in Korea and worked in radio and television for over 20 years, mostly on the radio side. But now I do live in Beijing. I work for CGTN Radio. I work on a show, on a podcast and a radio show called Roundtable. That's our logo right behind me, if you can see it there. I'm a member of a large team. I do that. I'm working on a second show. It's a new one. It's my project where my goal is to introduce what it's like to live here in Beijing and live here in China. Then I also appear on another show called Takeaway Chinese, and anyone who's interested in learning Chinese should check out that show. Anyway, you can find any of those shows if you're interested, Roundtable included, at radio.cgtn.com or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you check out your podcasts.
Sounds interesting. Steve, so please, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your program? And also, we would be interested if you also cover Korea and Hallyu items on it.
On Roundtable, we cover trending topics from things happening here in China, but also things happening from all around the world. And the goal as a show is to connect China to the world and then the world to China. And yeah, we do cover Korean content from time to time. We actually did one episode talking about the popularity of Korean convenience stores internationally. There was a story, I think she was an Australian vlogger who made a YouTube video about how incredible Korean convenience stores were. So we covered that, and then I shared my experiences about the types of things you can buy there, and it serves as a kind of restaurant, and you can really get some good items there as well. And my coworkers were thinking, are they really that good? And I said, oh yeah, they are. You know, I lived in Korea for so long. It's kind of like I'm the resident Korea expert here in Beijing at my work whenever things come up between China and Korea. Another example, we were discussing the Gaokao, the Chinese high school test where you get into that you take to get into university, and I drew the comparison about the Sunung in Korea and how similar it is, not only in terms of the test itself, but also how Korean and Chinese high school students face similar pressure to prepare for that test. Oh, and by the way, when the second season of Squid Game came out, there was a general buzz amongst my coworkers, so I became not just the Korea expert, but the Squid Game expert at that time, too.
I see. And I think the content creator from Australia is also someone that we had on the show, if we're talking about the same person.
Maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I believe so.
And Steve, you said you are the Korean expert, which is great. So you would actually know a lot about this next question. How is K content typically enjoyed in China then?
Well, social media, of course, is a popular way to consume it, but also, and I was a little surprised to see this, in our home, we have 3 Korean TV channels on our cable package. There's one for news, there's 2 for entertainment, and one of the channels shows current shows that are out now or came out recently. There's also popular talk shows and entertainment shows. One of the dramas that we were watching from Korea recently, I don't know if you know the show, it's called Darimi Family. It's where grandparents find money in a mountain buried underground, and you can watch the show for more details. But we were watching that on television here. There's also old dramas from the 90s, which are fun to watch. There's a Korean news channel, so we can keep up to date on what's happening in the country from a news perspective. So it's nice to be able to grab all of that content here. Actually, the dramas that are on TV here in China, the Korean dramas, they have English subtitles. So I was kind of laughing. I moved to China to watch Korean shows with English subtitles, and I thought, oh, the world really is getting a lot smaller. But the most impressive thing, culture-wise that I've seen on display here, there's a Korean Culture Center here in Beijing, and they have an exhibition on right now, as a matter of fact. So on the first floor, and this is in downtown Beijing, they're displaying K-dramas, K-pop, and Korean books as well. And they actually have Korean and Chinese authors there, and it's a cross-cultural promotion. And on the second floor, there's this huge Korean library where people can go and borrow Korean books. I think that's such a wonderful thing to be able to share cultures that way.
Very interesting, and also especially that we not only talk about K-pop and K-dramas, but now also having K-literature expand across the world, including in China. But let's talk a little bit about K-pop, because K-pop does have a strong fan base in China. So Steve, currently, who are the top K-pop stars in China?
Okay, well, let's play a game. I'll give you the song and you tell me who the singer is. This is what happened just 2 or 3 days ago. Okay, so I was at the department store. My wife and I were out just going for a walk around the department store. And one floor of the department store has a lot of restaurants. And there was a little girl there, maybe around, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was there with her grandmother. And the little girl was singing, apatu, 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 apatu. And her grandmother was clapping along with her. We know the song, right?
Yes, we do.
Of course, Rosé, Bruno Mars.
Exactly. So that's pretty popular here. Also, the Spring Festival just wrapped up here in China. And one of the holiday highlights is the Spring Festival Gala. It's this massive televised show. They've been doing it for many, many years here. And you might be curious to know that Song Yu-chi attended the 2025 CCTV Spring Festival Gala. You would know, of course, that she's a Chinese singer and songwriter. She's a dancer. She's a record producer. But she's best known as a member of the Korean girl group G-Idol. And she's won a lot of different awards over the years for her performances and her contributions to K-pop. And I think it was in 2024 that she won the Best Solo Artist Award at the Korea Grand Music Awards.
So, what's quite interesting is you've had experience both here in Korea and now in China. You've seen both areas as a tourist and as a resident now. Hallyu has been popular in China for some time. We've just talked about it. It's been the reason for increased visitors and tourists here. What's the latest on the tourism front between the two countries, do you think?
One of the big news stories recently was the visa-free program where tourists can visit China and stay up to 240 hours, and that comes out to about 10 days in total. And we were talking, and it's been in the news, about how many Korean tourists were taking advantage of that during the Spring Festival holiday. And this visa-free travel policy has really led to a substantial rise in inbound tourism from Korea. This is from an online travel website. The numbers are almost unbelievable. So during the holiday, the inbound bookings from Korea to China rose by 452% compared to the previous year. Shanghai, I think, was the preferred destination. So that's evidence that people coming from Korea to visit China is a popular thing to do with that visa policy, but also the other way around. Korea is offering similar perks to Chinese tourists. At the end, I think, of 2024, there was a trial for visa-free entry for groups of Chinese tourists, and the goal was to attract millions of Chinese tourists to the country and hopefully generate a lot of tourism revenue as well. So I think we're seeing great cooperation here and great success from a tourism point of view.
Right. There has been ups and downs in the tourism sector, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's hope that these figures will grow further in the near future. But Steve, you, having lived in both Korea and China, I mean, probably longer here in Korea, but are there any cultural differences that you have felt?
Yeah, people always want to ask about cultural differences, right? So I can find one. There's no real bowing culture here in China, historically perhaps, but not really in modern times. But what's funny is I lived in Korea so long that I'm constantly bowing to say hello and goodbye and sorry and excuse me and thank you. That's one little difference. But to be honest, I find there to be a lot more similarities than differences. And people always assume things are going to be so different, but they actually aren't. You know, Beijing is a huge city, just like Seoul. It's pretty English friendly, just like Seoul. The people are wonderfully kind, just like in Korea. Beijing is an old city, just like Seoul. During the holiday, we just finished the holiday season in China and in Korea as well. People go home, and there's huge travel numbers. People want to be with their families. That's on a personal level. But one of the things that I found really interesting too is that Korea and China share a similarity in the popularity of their shows and their movies and their love for the arts. For example, you know, Squid Game, I mentioned it already. That's a massively successful export around the world. Parasite, for example, would be a movie that did really well. It won the Oscar for Best Foreign, or for Best Picture, and it was the first foreign film to do that, to win an Oscar. And now in China, Ne Zha 2, it's breaking box office records. It passed a $1.7 billion. It's rewriting record books for IMAX. It's showing in theaters in America and other countries. First non-Hollywood film to break into the all-time global top 20 of highest grossing films. And actually, our company as well just launched an event called China Travel with Chinese Films. It's fun, so you can travel to the locations where films or movies were actually filmed. And the reason I mentioned that is because when we look at Korean culture and we see the successful export of those examples that I gave, K-pop, Korean food, Korean culture overall, Korean films, we see that the world is embracing Korean culture, and we see that the world is becoming more familiar with Korea, knowing more about the country. And I'm finding that now that I'm here in China and living here in Beijing, there's a similarity there. The popularity of this, the extreme popularity of this new animated film, it's mind-blowing, breaking these records. And I just, you know, being not from Korea, I was going to say from Korea, but having spent so many years in Korea, you know, it makes me proud to see Korean culture on display like that. And now that I'm here in China, I love to see that on display as well.
And we love to hear from all these stories from you, Steve. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today, but we'll sure be keeping in touch. So thank you very much, Steve, for connecting with us.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll have an opportunity to do it again. Thanks, guys.
We hope so too. Thank you. And thank you, Walter, for your contributions from Monday to Wednesday. We'll see you back next week.
I'll see you next week.
All right.